sir.
I know, we're here, so finally.
I enjoy your podcast so much, and I keep, like, a testament to how good it is. I keep thinking that I was actually on the show when you guys talked about Gun. I know I was not. Like, I went back to double check, but I like, it feels so real. It feels like a conversation that you're having with folks. Like, it just feels like you're just in the room so much that, like, my mind, it like recoded that memory like I was there.
You start thinking about it hard enough, and you're like, wait a second, I wasn't there. It's like when someone tells you a story so many times that you've heard it so much, you're like, you almost felt like you were there. Like, you could almost tell the story better than they can. You weren't even there yet.
Yes, exactly. Although I think that there's, like, because I've been listening to podcasts for a long time, like, I think art, you can speak on this too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can't write and listen to words, but like art, you can. Like, I could understand not being able to listen to podcasts while you were writing, but when you're drawing, or for me when I'm painting, like, it actually helps the time. Like, it's a different part of your brain. You're not thinking in a verbal way. It's like, I feel like it's the right side of the brain versus the left. So like. For me, and also, like, your music, you've got, like, even if you have, like, a ton of music that you like, you've only got, like, maybe 2 weeks worth if you actually had to listen to all of it. So it's very easy, like, in the beginning of your career to burn through all of your favorite records.
Yep.
So, like as far as, like, getting new stuff to listen to, podcasts were fucking perfect because, like, most of them were, like, an hour long, and you're like, wow, like, 3 of these kills a whole workday.
Oh, totally.
But the side effect of that is, I think you build these sort of, like, relationships with these because you hear them every week. You're having like, in some cases, like 1 to 2 hour, like Kevin Smith, when he started, he was going like 2 hours every week.
Yep.
You feel like that's more than I talk to any of the people I know. You know?
Yeah. You almost feel like you knew these people more than anything. I was like, speaking of even Kevin Smith, I remember like me and Ryan Dunnigan, back in a handful of years ago by now, we went to go see one of the Education ones live and so on like that. And then we met Andy McElfresh outside later on. So I just felt like I mean, I know I never met you before, but I feel like I really know you.
No, I think it's so true because you have inside jokes with these people. Like, there's stuff that, like, there are inside jokes with podcasts you can't even share with your friends because you're like, oh, they don't listen or stuff like that.
Yep.
And like it's intimate, you know, like I think at a certain point, like, they say this about reality TV shows, like, at a certain point you go in and you're going to play this character, but after 2 fucking weeks, like, you're exhausted. You just are yourself, you know? So I think, like, these people come in, they talk, they've got, like, 45 minutes of chatter, but, like, over the course of 2 years, it stops being, you know, chatter, and it starts just being, like, their life and what they're doing.
Yep.
Although it's a one-sided conversation, so, like, you feel this intimate connection with this other person who has no idea who you are in the universe.
No, you were now just a digit on, like, you know, a number going up every single time. Like, hey, that's an extra listen right there, I see. But no, it's kind of weird how that is, you know, and well, I just even think of like how we sort of all got connected, I guess, to, hey, welcome to the show, here we are, got Jack Foster on here, and I guess the way to sort of say it is, I think we started off as Ryan found your book on Comixology. That was how it was. So an Old Man Orange podcast, he's like, dude, I found this really cool book, you want to do it on the show? It's called Gun. I'm like, oh, awesome, yeah, let's do it, like, you know, so I went on there, bought it up on there, and so on. This was the first arc, the 1, 2, 3 section. You know, so we went with that. And it was just that one. It's like, oh my gosh, this has got like amazing artwork in it because it's got that cool painted look that I always think about with like a lot of 80s, 90s kind of books. Like, you know, Judge Dredd used it, you know, in there and so on. Of course, there's some of the Batman and, you know, Marvel ones when they got the artistic flair to them. They would kind of use it and always would make these really cool, you know, look and it feel, and it gives it almost like a dark tone. I mean, there's even like, it sounds weird, like there's some kids books that I have from back in the day. Like there's this like one of the, you remember when they just used to have like creepy kids books? That was like the best way to sort of describe it. But like,
oh God, yeah,
I had like this the Three Little Pigs and the Werewolf book or whatever, and it was just, I had like this very like super dark, artsy, like painted wolf and everything. I remember as a kid, like, this is actually quite frightening, but it had like a very painted look to it and everything. Like, probably nowadays, if I went and pulled it out, I'd be like, dude, this artwork's amazing. But as a kid, you're like, what is going on here? Like, you know what I mean? It's like...
And I feel like there's a window when that happens, because there's a period from the 50s to the 60s where that stuff is like, no, it's got to be for kids, it's got to be nice. And then from like the 80s and the 90s, that like, you know, because it's all cyclical, that sort of like conservatism starts up again. Mm-hmm. But then there's this little window when I think you have like these fucking great illustrators who can't, you know, it's not that they can't get other work, but there's just not other real work for them.
Yeah.
So like they're like, look, I'm gonna do Hansel and Gretel, but it's gonna be fucking dark.
Yeah. You know,
can I Can I cuss? My favorite thing to say on a podcast ever.
Of course, I have everything. It's full of freedom and so on. That's what I think about a podcast. But to me, a podcast is supposed to be, in a sense, if you come down to like multimedia, artistic creation, and so on, it's supposed to be the most laid back, free flowing, freedom filled kind of thing. Like I feel if people put too much structure on a podcast, you're defeating a podcast's purpose. It's literally supposed to be like two guys having a conversation. Like almost like if you were in like a like a diner, or if you were like in a bar, or if you were just like, walking down the street, or, even like driving in a car. Like I've even thought about this before. I think we recorded one episode like this, but I'm like, like those conversations you have when you're in a car with a buddy and you're just like going like, who knows, you're driving for 2 hours and you get these real nice conversations. Like that's almost like a podcast right there. Those unrecorded ones. Yeah.
Oh, may I build on that?
Yes.
I just I don't know if you know Ed Luce, the guy who does Wolfable Loaf. It's a Fantagraphics book. It's sort of it's in that world. It's sort of like San Francisco, kind of like not totally underground. Like it's in Fantagraphics, so it can't be totally underground, but it has sort of like one foot in there. It's wrestlers, like Wolfable Loaf is this wrestler, or is possibly a wrestler called Goat Blood, and then it's sort of like so it's like a little bit metal, a little bit wrestling, and then there's a lot of cats. Either way, Ed Luce, the creator, who is kind of a mentor for me in comics, he just did this mural for an animation company here in LA, in Burbank, Titmouse. So they do like Rick and Morty and like all the coolest, best animation. So he did this like 80-foot mural, and so he lives in SF. He was down to do the mural. Since we're friends, I was like, hey, we should get together. Yeah. It was right before, like right at the beginning when we were starting. And so I was like, hey, have you done a mural before? How's it going? Blah, blah, blah. And I think he'd done like a day or two, and you could sort of see the sort of like, oh, fuck, I just bit off something bigger than I can gag on. Kind of like, looking at so I offered my services to help, and he took me up on it. So for like 2 weeks, not every day I had, other commitments, but I would go in and sort of like, he would sort of flat out the images and I would paint them. But the point is, we were doing these like 10-hour days, and we're just two guys painting a mural. We're friendly, of course, but like I think like this may be your experience, I don't know, but like it's like something out of college in your later 20s to 30s, you just don't make friends in the same way. Like I feel like
I know what you mean, because I used to use this thing as like, it's almost like when you're in school, it's like you have this social world. You don't think anything of it, but it's literally a place where like you're there to make friends and so on like this. And the second that you're out of it, then it's like you're free flowing, and it's not like you're not talking to people every day. I mean, you might have some people that may be at work or something. And what I kind of learned is the gym, if you go to a gym, that almost is kind of like that, where you'll just start meeting random people. You see them every day and so on. And it almost kind of gives you like the school vibe, like in a good way, where it's just like, hey, here's the people I see every day. Maybe his class is, he's doing weights over here, or, I'm working out, doing pull-ups over here or something like that. But, you're in there, and that always felt like that was that social part that sometimes missing. So, I see what you mean by that.
Oh, totally. And I also think that like when you're younger, like when you are 20, like you've only got 4 or 5 years of real experience to talk about. Yeah. So like, getting to know someone isn't this sort of like, long, but like, like when you are 40, there's so much it's like trying to come in on like season 7 of Game of Thrones. Yeah. You're like, who the fuck are all these people? And I think people just don't do it. They're just like, hey, look, the needle drops here. You're going to catch everything past this point, but there isn't time to go back on it all. But with these long 10-hour days, like it was this real opportunity to just sit and like dive in, and like like we're focused on the thing you're doing, like you were saying about driving. We're focused on the thing you're doing, so you're like you're not fully. It's not like sitting across from somebody at a table and talking, where you're just connecting in that way. But you are just sort of like talking at each other and around each other, and like conversations build off of each other, and like that experience. Doing the mural was fun, but like the experience of just like getting to really know somebody over these like long hauls of time. Like I haven't done that since I was like probably in like 10 or 15 years. And what a fucking great way to like make friends.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. Because it's the same thing like if you're on like a job with anybody for like a long while. Like there was this new guy I kind of work with, and I do kind of like a mixed match between video making, sound engineering, DJing, like anything and everything, audio, video, and lights and all that kind of stuff, some form of production in that. And we're just kind of like hanging out, and so on. His name's Eric. He's a real cool guy and so on. But, it's like I just do his just
Shout out, Eric.
Yeah, just saying he was a nice, friendly dude. That's all I knew about him and so on. But we had this time to kind of hang out on this event and so on. So we're sitting there, and it's like, I learned, like Raphael's like, dude, I'm really into horror movies and so on like that. He's like, I'm into kind of sculptures and making masks and all this other kind of art. And so I'm like, dude, that's amazing and so on like that. I was like, dude, this is so cool. And it's like, dude, I'm like, oh, I love horror movies too. And I feel like I just don't always have enough people to talk to him about, you know what I mean?
No, totally. And also I think the thing the pandemic I'm sorry, who needs more pandemic material? But after the pandemic I was like I spent so much time with these 4 or 5 different prongs of the things that I'm interested in. Mm-hmm. You know, on this sort of deep solo dive. I am very interested to talk comics with comic people again and talk movies with movie people again and just have those shared interests instead of just sort of I had a lot of the hey, I have nothing to do but sit on the couch and watch 40 hours of television. Now I'm eager to sit with people and have them sort of that's I wish we were breaking out more. Can I pause for a second?
Of course. I
love Pizza Boys.
Hey.
I love Pizza Boys so much, and I think I think a lot of people I don't want to call out anybody, but I'm gonna just sort of to my taste. Mm-hmm. I think Stranger Things is a show that kind of wants to capitalize on a certain amount of nostalgia and capture a certain mode and a feeling. And I think it sort of it catches the sort of set dressing of it, but doesn't actually get the vibe, what it's really like to be a kid going mm-hmm. around town on your bicycle and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it gets moments and I think it does a good job, but I think it likes the look and the pastiche of that, but mm-hmm. it doesn't necessarily give the content. Whereas I think Pizza Boys feels so authentic to that experience of being a little young and at loose ends, your life isn't sort of you don't have a mortgage and a wife and your life isn't gel hasn't set yet, and you're at loose ends and up to shit, and everything, even the mundane things, are adventures. And I think that feeling, a lot of people conjure that, but they don't in the actual conversations, the actual things that they do in the actual day-to-day business of the book never really get there. But I think Pizza Boys, it's huffing it.
Well, dude, that's such a fantastic review. Thank you so very much, dude. But yeah, that's always what I
put that on the back of the book. Yeah, it's huffing it.
Yeah, it's huffing it. So because I all the back of the books, I kind of give it sort of almost those feelings of those old ads you would see for pizzas, where it's the taste, the sizzle, the magic of a pizza at your very own home and so on. But that'd be but in a comic book form and so on. That's what that reminds me of right there. Well, I mean, that's the thing I always try to capture sort of in it, is the fact that I call it that give or take about around 25, you're kind of past you sort of did generally either your schooling or what have you, but you still got that free time. You're not landlocked to anything, and it's just that time where you'd hang out with your buddies and you'd go somewhere. You'd be always working on projects and creating and so on, because nowadays I feel now I just sort of I feel like I just create in my fortress of solitude, and so on. It's I mean, I remember when the pandemic happened, everyone was man, life's so different. So I'm literally the only thing I lost was going to the movie theaters. Beyond that, my life is still, I literally just work on a computer so much, and it's sadly it wasn't that much different. I don't know what that's saying about myself, but it's
no, I am the same. And I kind of thought I mean, I'm the same. I also work from home, so it was. I mean, let me just say, my sister was a server in Florida, so
mm-hmm.
She certainly got the worst experience of it.
Yeah.
They wouldn't pay unemployment, and it was just a nightmare. So totally feel bad for everybody who had it was a huge a lot of water got displaced. So I'm totally down with that. I mean, I'm sympathetic to that.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But my own personal experience was very different. And during the last when it was the housing crisis back in 2008, that was a time when all right, believe me, when things were going great for everyone, things were not great at my house. So I know what it's like to be on the other side of it. And then weirdly during that last sort of disaster, I got a really great job, and mm-hmm. Things went in the opposite direction for me. So I guess the polarity of my life is crisis, I'm fine, golden for everyone, watch out. So this time around, same thing. I was home, and also I live in Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
Los Angeles is a great city in the world, except the traffic is really bad.
Yeah, well,
and then
it's just part of it.
there was no traffic.
Well, I remember, like, because I was going to, like, Sacramento, and, like, a couple times right during, like, when it first started off, I'm like, dude, this is amazing. Like, there's, like, 10 other people on the road right now. Can we just keep it, like at least the highways just like this? This is, like, you'll never, everybody's got their own lane.
No, it's so beautiful. Like, and if you don't know what it's like, I think, like I lived in Boston. Boston's a beautiful city, but, like, it's fucking cold in the winter. So it's like that. It's like, oh, if you could just take the winters out of Boston, what a great city. If you could take the traffic out of LA, what a great city. And then we did.
Yeah, so found a way to get rid of it. You see, that's the thing, is you got to look at the positives and everything. That's how I always sort of feel. Like, you know what I mean? Every disaster has, there is always a good merit to it, a silver lining, if anything, And hey, if we have less traffic, well, there we go. I'll take it. I'll take whatever you get. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna complain.
So I thought everybody was gonna fall in love with this. I thought everybody was gonna be like, oh, I love having, like, all this time to myself, and I don't have to come up with reasons to not go out and see my friends, and I don't have to, like, lie and say, like, oh yeah, like, I can just, I'm just free to sort of, like, like, burrow deeper into the earth. And then, like I think, like, 2 months in, people were, like, going insane, and I was like, oh, I get it. Like, this is not what everybody wants.
Well, that's the one thing, is I just feel like that. Like, I've always felt like my entire life, like, I'm like, I literally could just be like that person who, like, lives out of their home, like, give me some books, give me some old movies, you know what I mean? Like, as long as I can work on my comic book and write stories, do a little bit of podcast, I don't need a whole lot. As I said, like, the one thing I really realized is, like, I'm like, I guess the only place I really go to, like, on a weekly basis is the movie theater. And when they took that away, that was the big one for me. Is like, you took away the movie theater, because at first I was like, man, the movie theater is gonna be great. Nobody's gonna be coming here anymore. It's gonna be all to myself every single time. I'm like, I know what I'm doing.
So wait, going back to Pizza Boys.
Yes.
So all right. So you said it's that sort of, like, that age between, like, 25 and 30. So how old are you now? Are you reflecting on it?
I'm 32 now. So
32. So like, do you feel like? Well, how long have you been working on it?
So this is the thing. Pizza Boys was originally a script that I was going to write, that I wrote when I was 17 years old, a full movie script. I wrote it with my buddies Ryan Dunnigan and my buddy Cisco Garcia, who are, characters in the book too. Yeah. And so we kind of, got together and kind of had ideas and so on. And the idea of making the script back then was I wanted to do movies that was, like, in, like, that teen comedy, like, college one, like American Pie, Van Wilder, Accepted. There was that whole era where there was just all those movies. I was like, dude, I want to make one of these too, because that was like, it's like we'll make like kind of a teen fun comedy and so on like that. And so it had a little bit of a different kind of take. And I've used some of the elements as time goes on. Like the first issue, like the way that starts off, how it just is like about them going to get pizza. I remember somebody wrote a review once. He's like, dude, the first issue is just about them going to get a pizza. It's like, yeah, that is it. It's the whole point is you can write an entire story about driving to go get a pizza, but, like, that was kind of the start of it and so on. And then it kind of worked its way, into other stuff and so on. And then kind of just went like many ideas you start off with and so on. It goes kind of like dormant. I remember we even did, like, interviews in San Francisco. There's, like, I have a tape that actually has people trying out for Pizza Boys. Auditioning and everything, because at first I was like, well, we can shoot my friends, but maybe we could just get, like, actors and so on to play it too. Like, why not, And so I have material like that, but then it kind of went dormant and you started working on other projects and so on. I did, animation. Me and Ryan Dunnigan, we created things like we did our Drunk Batman series, because that was supposed to be like, hey, we'll have a gateway thing. Batman, Batman Begins, and Dark Knight were all kind of coming out. We're like, we'll use Batman to be kind of our gateway, and then we can show them our original stuff. That'll be, you lead them in with Batman. We do a funny Batman parody where Batman loses all his money and he just becomes an alcoholic and lives in a motorhome. And then, because it's like, that was what we did. We did the thing where, like, you watch, like, El Mariachi and you watch, like, Clerks and so on. They kind of explain, they're like, hey, just use what you sort of have. It was like, well, we got an old motorhome. We got a Batman costume. We'll just make that, and we'll just do it, like, just sort of like The Wrestler, I guess, where it's this downhill thing, but it's kind of funny still at the same time. And then it just
I love it.
As it worked its way through, I guess we're just kind of getting to, like, did animation, because, I got to the point where, like, live action was getting a little bit of a pain, because, you always had to have a team, you always had to have different actors, and people always have their schedules and all that kind of life's hardships that get in the way, where, for myself, it's like, I would do anything for movies. Like, if someone said there's a movie, like, I'd drop anything I had to do in the day. I'm like,
oh
there.
My God, yeah.
I'm like,
no, any job, like, hey, I'm going to be out for 2 weeks. Sorry.
Yeah.
A dead relative or whatever.
Yeah, I played, like, an extra in, like, this, like, tiny, like, Western ones, and it was like, I literally just left school for 3 days. I'm like, yep, doing this. It's like, I don't care.
Did the movie come out? Was it like a real movie, or, like, was it like a Friends making something?
It wasn't Friends. It was like was like a low budget like TV pilot kind of thing. I mean, the biggest person on there is they had the special effects guy from Slither. I remember that was like the big.
Oh wow.
So it was just kind of like I just think it was just kind of like almost some like B movie maker guys trying to pitch like a kind of a corny like a TV show that probably would have worked in like 89, early 90s, but it felt kind of odd at like the later 2000s, maybe 2006 or I guess mid 2000s, 2005 maybe.
But going back to that, or maybe jumping to the end. So, like, what you're describing to me, like, how is that not like a Netflix series? Or like, all right, so let's get before the Netflix series. Like, why isn't it just like a web series? Like, I feel like it's like you don't have these huge budget like if you could get people to sign on to do the like just to be the dudes.
Yeah.
Like almost every location is a pickup location. Almost every I don't know. Like I feel like you've got like the Harmon stuff, like Community. Like I feel like you have such a built-in audience who love that, like who get that. I hate to overuse this word, like the vibe.
Yeah, I know what you mean though.
So you make a web series, like what was that, High Maintenance, and then then like people see the web series and they're like, you know what, boom, HBO Max.
Yeah, well, as I said, like I have footage of when we start, because we were going to shoot in kind of live action. We had a variation of it called Good Old Tuolumne that we sort of did. We did like one animated bit of it, so that's up there on YouTube and so on. And then we were going to do a live action version. We're just like, we'll play ourselves and so on. And that was kind of the turning point where I just had a couple of friends that just like, they're like, yeah, man, I'm like, they just couldn't show up. And one guy, like they tell you they're going to be there and so on. And then just got to the point where it was like, this is getting to be too much. And that was like kind of the final straw of like doing live action stuff. It's like, I would love to do it, but it's just like, it's every single time. There's always somebody that flakes out on you. And it's like, I got to the point where I'm like, okay, I don't want to act in it and have to shoot it at the same time. Cause that's really, that is like, that's like the two things. It's like, that always seemed to happen to me. It's like, okay, well, here, I'll be the guy who's shooting it. But then somehow, some way, it's like, well, I'll be one of the guys acting in it too. And then I get that like double whammy of like, no.
No.
It's one or the other. I'm either going to
You're the guy doing Friends. Yeah. No. It never is. It never is. Although that is true. I think you get one bite at the apple. Like you can get everybody together for one weekend to do one shoot.
Yeah.
But like once it's a thing that's going to like stagger out over a couple weeks, that's when you start like, then it's just Swiss cheese. Like there's just all these holes where people start like, like, oh, I can't do this or I can't. Yeah. No, it's a super frustrating thing. Although I want it so badly.
Well, and this is what leads me into the comics all in all, is because the fact is I got to a point, because I kind of learned how to draw sort of a little bit later in life. I mean, like, I would draw here and there as a kid, but nothing like, I never was too serious about it. Like, I literally didn't really get into drawing until about right after kind of going like, this movies with other people is not seeming to work out. What else can we do? And we started doing like, well, we could do animation. And animation, you can kind of get away with kind of funky drawings because it slightly moves. It almost makes up for that,
right.
So it's like, okay, we'll
covers a lot of sense.
Yeah, we'll just do goofy talking head stuff, and that's all we'll need to do. And we did some of the Drunk Batman ones. We did a series called Wallaby the Rabbit about British rabbits and stuff, and made it kind of dark and funny. And, just had some things there. I was like, cool. And then in that process, I kind of just started drawing a little bit more, started reading books, started getting kind of like down. And then I was like, you know what? I think I can draw just good enough to do Pizza Boys, and then I can do it all on my own. That was kind of the thing. I was like, it's something that I can do 100% myself. I don't have to worry about anybody else. Yeah, I can write it. I can draw it, and then there it is. And then lo and behold, that's how I kind of got into it. And, recently I look at from like issue 12 to like issue 1. I mean, it's a huge difference for how my art goes, but I'm like, I've gotten to the point where I used to be kind of like, I use like the artist kind of like, it's like, come watch a writer draw, you know what I mean? Kind of thing. It's sort of a joke. And now I'm kind of like my art. I'm like, I actually like my art quite a bit nowadays. Like I felt like it's like, in that like later life, it's become really good. And that's almost the one too, people will tell you like, oh man, I mean, I can't draw or anything like that. I'm like, dude, do you think I could draw? I only learned how to draw like so many years ago. You just got to put the time and effort in. I mean, that's how it is. You can do anything you want in the world. You just got to be willing to put the time in. That's the key thing.
I think that's true, but can I also build on that?
Yes.
Because like I think that I hear that also all the time. Like oh, I can't draw. And then the thing is, like, I can't sing, but like the pleasure I get from like singing in the car or like whenever there's nobody around, or even karaoke, like just the pleasure I get from the verb, like the act of singing. Like, because it's not about like whether you're good at it, and you don't have to like only sing. And I feel like singing is one of those things that everyone is like, everybody fucking sings, and everybody like gets the same sort of like pleasure from it. Like I say like, oh, I love to like belt in the shower, and you're like, oh, me too.
Yeah.
Art is the same thing, but it doesn't get the same like you don't have to be good at it to just sort of like, here's what you do: you go and you draw, and like once you start, like it's like once it like catches you, once you sort of latch in and you like go into it, like time has no meaning. Hours can pass. You don't even know. You're just sort of like in this place in your head. And it's so super helpful. Like my friend, he puts together these models, and they're so cool. They're like, he takes like scratch kits and he makes like airplanes into spaceships and stuff like that. And so like while he's doing it, he's sort of like, you know, where does this funnel into, and what's the power sources? You know, like he's just sort of creating as he does it. And I think that's what happens with art. You're creating as you do it. And like it's such a good fucking feeling, and I think it's good mental health, and and it doesn't matter. You don't have to show it to anybody. Like it doesn't matter if you're, you know, good in scare quotes or not. Like all that matters is that you enjoy doing it at the time. And then in addition to that, if you want to, like, because once you start doing it, you realize like, hey, you work at it, it's not that hard. You know, like it's every little bit gets you a little further. It's like batting practice. You go in, you swing. First times you miss, and then you hit one, and then you hit more than you miss, and like you slowly get better over time. Like you do anything over time, you get better. I think that's the problem with punk. These guys, they don't know how to play, or people, they don't know how to play their instruments. You start touring after 2 months, or suddenly you're a good guitarist.
Well, I remember that was always the thing that like you'd hear. There'd be like somebody would give you kind of like musician advice, be like, hey, if you don't think you know how to sing, this is what you do. You go play street music for like an entire year, and believe it or not, you will be a good singer and a good guitar player at the end of that journey. And I think that's kind of how it is. Once again, you could do anything, and you could do anything good enough. I'm not saying you have to be like, I think people get almost this thing too. They picture the top thing. It's almost like, I'll use this in comics. It's like if you look at Jim Lee, you're gonna believe that you're never gonna be able to do that because you keep looking at those like Batman art. You're like, dude, the detail. Look at there's more detail in Batman's boot than there is in an entire page of my work. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's kind of it. Is once you start seeing like the other spectrums of comics, and that's I think what I always like about that medium so much is that you can have ones where like it's got the most like extreme ridiculous amount of detail in it, but then there could be things just like even like Sunday kind of cartoon funny page strips, and the artwork really, if you kind of break it down, it's very simple and so on, and they both work. You know what I mean? Like each one kind of works. Because for me, the big book that I kind of saw that made me feel like, hey, I think this is kind of possible was Scott Pilgrim.
Right?
Because that was the book that you look at, and it's not saying it. I mean, like the artwork in it's really cool, but the artwork was kind of one of those ones like you look at it and you go, I think I could do this, or I could do something of this kind of similar style. It didn't have that like overwhelming feel that certain books kind of have. And then even at that, once you kind of discover more Marvel and DC, you find that there is books out there that have kind of artistic art in there that actually, it is like a little bit like, I guess it looks cooler, but it's not like pure perfect, like, art that you kind of would expect out of those kind of books. Almost like if it came out like, here's how you draw them, or like how to draw the Marvel Comics way kind of style or something. You go, here's a very artistic one that takes liberties, and not everything's kind of like in there and so on. And it kind of you find those books and it kind of gives you more of like, oh, okay, I think I can try something like this.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
I have. Hey, Dean, I'm on a call. I can't talk right now.
Oh, shut up.
Okay.
Yesterday I couldn't move around. I had to see if these kids was living out here.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Dean. Sincere apologies. I have a
no worries.
Elderly scattered neighbor. Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's like I always feel like sometimes when you podcast, it's almost like you need to get one of those like on-air lights. Like, though granted, I think there's a lot of people that would still walk in even if that was up.
No, I definitely need to do like the sock on the doorknob, because like I feel like there's a lot of springing in. So to go back, tell me about how do you draw? Do you start drawing in the real world? Do you start drawing digitally? How do you, like, when you're drawing, how do you make it?
See, because this is actually a question I also wanted to ask you too, but we'll trade back and forth.
No. This is
the weird way though. I learned to draw in a bizarre fashion compared to like I guess everybody else. And I mean, granted, I like as a kid, once again, you have those moments where you draw here and there. But once I kind of got really into drawing, I learned to draw on the those like the tablets that like right. you don't draw on the screen. You like kind of are looking at the screen and you're drawing down below next to your keyboard. That's literally how I pretty much learned how to really draw. And so nowadays I just use that I do all the sketching, then I do my inking, I do all my toning, I do everything with that tablet.
So have you ever tried the Cintiq where it's like like it's your hand on a screen like it would be over paper, or do you just prefer it on the tablet?
You know what? Because I have an iPad Pro here from my girlfriend and whatnot, and she uses that for all her artwork and so on. I attempted that, and I remember because she went from straight, pen and paper kind of artwork.
Yeah.
Got that kind of, tablet and started drawing with Procreate and so on. And she like jumped into that like instantaneously. It was like in about one day she kind of converted right into it and it all worked out.
Oh, right on.
I drew on there and I felt like I drew worse than I ever drew on. It's like, I was like, why do my drawings not look that good? And I was like, you know what? I'm so comfortable with the tablet. I feel like until it got to the point where if I felt like I needed that extra like edge to kind of go with it, or there was something missing, I totally would. But I've just gotten so used to it, and it's not failing me, and it all kind of works out. I'm like, you know what, I'm fine. Until it gets to that point, it's sort of like almost if you have software it works totally fine for you. You don't feel like you need a reason to upgrade it. It's like maybe you don't need to upgrade it yet. Just
no, and I think so here's crackpot theory. This will be the first crackpot theory of the podcast, but like I think your brain wears these grooves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like because like I do the same thing. Like so I started like pencil drawing,
mm-hmm.
and then like once the sort of tablets came along, I was like, hey, you can, and if you do it digitally, you can sort of like it can save time in these other ways. And then so like I tried to sort of learn how to do it that way, which is what you're describing, where you're kind of looking at the screen and you're getting like this like muscle memory of how you're supposed to draw, which was always frustrating because in comparison to just drawing on a sheet of paper, which is different because you're looking at the paper, like it just wasn't. And I was like, well, fuck this. It's easier to scan it in. But then when the Cintiq came out, I was like, oh, well, this is perfect because I'll be looking at the screen on the Cintiq as if I was looking at it. And of the three, it's the worst. Like there's just like I can't describe it. I think that it's like the surface of the Cintiq is smooth in a way that paper isn't, and the stylus that you're using is not like a pencil or a pen. And like I'm also an old dog at this point, and like I was like, like just working on a computer, I feel like is such a like is the new trick I learned. Do I have to also relearn this new way to draw? So like I'm stuck off, but I completely get it what you mean, because like even like of the two between the Cintiq and the tablet, I would prefer the tablet, although ultimately I'm still kind of almost working analog and then just scanning everything and then bells and whistles after it's scanned.
Now, for when it comes down to the gun, because this is what I'm always kind of interested in, because I know you got the painted look and everything there. So do you just kind of go straight from like you kind of sketch things out like almost in a pencil and so on, get your design so on, and then you paint over the top and everything?
Yeah, totally. In fact, this is such great audio, but I'm going to show you a like. Ooh. Here's like it's an actual. Now this is a kind of a lie, because like I'm never that good on one like. So I'm sorry. The picture I was showing is like a cover, and it's a full image painted on watercolor paper, which is how I work mostly. But I'm never that good like all the time. Like you'll be like if you're doing a page, like you've got like 8 panels on the page, or 6 if you're reasonable. And so like 4 come out great, and 2 are absolute garbage. So then I'll just redraw the other 2, or like so like I think like the actual raw files or the raw paper that Gunn is drawn on, it's a lot of like it's Frankenstein together in Photoshop, which is the kind of like I think digital makes a lot of this super. I don't want to say it's easy, but like you can just sort of polish everything in this way that like I think like the people who were working back in the 60s, the early Marvel and DC stuff. I mean, they just did not get that freedom.
No, it's like you that's the thing is you make a mistake, if you can fix it, cool. If not, we're printing it anyways. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think in particular there are things that like, and I'm a stickler, so like, and also I think art is weird. Like you can be very good at it one day and you wake up the next day and you completely forget how to draw hands. Does this happen to you?
Yeah,
So it's like, oh, this thing that I am usually fine with for whatever reason on this particular panel, it goes wrong. And you just like off to the side, I'll just redraw the hand and repaint it and then just digitally like slap it over. I've gotten better at sort of like hiding my seams so that like you can like look at something and not even know like, like, oh, I took that guy's head and blew it up so that he looked like a real human being and not like a microman.
Yeah, because that's what I always feel like that's the tricky part about, the almost doing it kind of very traditional and so on. Because like, I mean, I've even had it before where I like, because I'll try to just doing little sketches every once in a while just on, pencil and pen and all that kind of stuff. And I remember one time I went there, I'm like, oh, I made a mistake. I literally hit Control-Z on my keyboard. I'm like, oh, wait a second, it doesn't work like that in the real world.
No, I the two things about digital, the Command-Z are the like is oh god, I wish we could get that. And then you can zoom. And so like if you start drawing something and you start on like an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, like you don't plan accordingly, then like suddenly you're down with a magnifying glass trying to draw somebody's face. So like the zooming is sort of like, that'd be nice to import backwards into analog.
Yeah, 'cause I feel all those little things like there, it's like, I mean, like, granted, I guess once you sort of get it kind of, you get your groove going and everything like that, kind of what you're looking for and where not to, like, kind of, but I bet you those, I feel like the initial stuff where you just kind of learn things and then it's like, oh, wait a second, what did I just do here? This is not going to turn out well on, once it goes into, like, comic book size.
Oh, that's another thing. Like, I think like when you're working big, you sort of like as everything shrinks. Like I used to think like, oh, this is how you get the super detailed Jim Lee stuff. Because if you look at it in real size, you're like, oh, this is normal. But when it's shrunk down like 40% to be a comic, but then what you don't kind of realize is like suddenly the 2 inches you left for the bubble, the word bubble is not nearly enough.
Yep.
And then like all this other like background stuff that you spend a lot of time on, no one's even gonna see. Like that is, I feel like the first issue to the second issue is such like the learning curve is it's almost an ellipse.
Well, that's how I sort of felt because I felt by like issue 3, like is Pizza Boys at least. I kind of felt like at least I kind of had it dialed in on how I was gonna at least go from this point forward. Where the first 2 kind of were like the definite learning ones. By 3, I was like, okay, at least I kind of got structure and style. And one thing I learned, especially since you brought up the word balloons, this is the one I started doing like early on, as I realized because that whole thing is that you draw this huge background and so on, you ink it out and everything like that, and then you realize that the words you wrote in your script were definitely way more than there was for space that you left. So I started doing the thing that like when I do the pencils and then I do the words before I even ink anything, so I don't put any like hard effort into it yet, and then realize that the words are going to end up taking up more room than I thought they were going to.
No, totally. Do you do the lettering too?
Yeah, I do the lettering too. So I just.
So you do everything.
Like I do.
Like, it is a one-stop shop.
There's literally I do everything from I do the editing, I do it anything and everything I can do. That's kind of how it is. So I mean, like that's always kind of because that's sometimes the thing I think about is like you'll talk to certain guys where like there's like 2 people on the team or something like that. You know what I mean? And like sometimes I used to not think much of it because first you'd hear be like, oh, there's the guy who writes, and then here's the fella or gal that draws, and so on like that. And then I remember at first I was going like. So this is my always joke was, so one person works 3 days, the other person works 3 months. Is it that's kind of how it goes? Because let's be honest, I'm not saying that there's like writing's definitely a big deal in comics and so on, but the full on work part, not just the thing in the stories and all that kind of stuff. That script's like what 24 pages, give or take. I mean, you're not writing a whole, and it's not like you're writing 24 pages like in a school report or something like that. You're writing 24 pages of generally dialogue and some descriptions, But then I kind of got to the point where I started thinking about, I'm like, oh well, here's the thing. When one person's working on the drawings and now there's all that downtime from like the writer waiting for the next one, they're doing the promotions and the advertising and talking and spreading the word and doing all that stuff that I've always kind of like when you're like when I start drawing, it's almost like that other stuff goes out the window. It's like, oh, we're in draw mode now, but you almost sort of need that like cheerleader kind of to be there to sort of be like, hey, you go work and I'll keep everybody interested. I'll talk to people and so on. Like that's the one thing I always feel it's kind of missed. Like when you kind of do like 90% of the stuff yourself or or the whole thing.
No, first of all, because I do everything, but like when you say you do everything, people, I think they only see the tip of the iceberg that kills the Titanic and not the like huge behemoth underneath. Cause like you said, I feel like any of this social media stuff, like I wasn't big on social media. Like I was like, I don't, I like you. I want to do the work. I want to draw. I don't want to I like Twitter. I thought was like, oh, this is just time wasting, and but then you start seeing like, oh, people who accumulated 20,000 followers, like they're getting jobs based on that. So I was like, oh, great. So that's the job. That's the trick now.
Yeah.
So like then you have to do it, and then in order to do that, you have to sort of ring that bell every day. So that's just one job, and then you have to do that across 3, possibly 4 different And then it's like, well, now do I have to learn TikTok?
Yeah.
If I don't get in on TikTok now, am I going to be like trying to catch up 2 years later? So like I feel like that just doing that is one thing, which is also like it's still not even like the lettering takes a time, editing it takes a time, like going through and sort of like making something ready for print is like surprisingly time consuming.
Yep.
Like all this stuff. And then like when you like you have to write a press release and you have to sort of like reach out to people and be like, hey, will you talk about this book, and hey, will you da da da, and all this stuff is sort of like, and like if you had like a day and your day is a pie chart, you have like 80% of the day is still, because like that book takes 3 months to draw.
Yeah.
For you, maybe. For me, it takes 2 years. Yeah. But like, so like every day you're already sort of like, I'm trying to throw as much time as I can to get this out at a reasonable amount. And that leaves like 20% left over for all this other stuff, which actually takes up, 80% as well.
Oh.
And like, and then it's like I got into this, like I wanted to make comics. I like telling stories and I like drawing. Mm-hmm. But then it's like, well, now I have to figure out how to write like log lines, and I have to figure out how to write like marketing romance, and like how to write like how to come up with new shit to say on Instagram that doesn't sound like, hey, come buy my book.
Yeah.
Or like. So like I feel like there's all this stuff, and then you reach a point like everybody else, like anything. You're a human being, and you reach like day 50, and you're like, I fucking hate all this.
Yeah, exactly. So you post one more post, you're like, come buy my book or die, and then you're like, okay, it's gonna work its magic now. Hopefully someone might think it's like, funny.
I never signed up for this, I never signed up for sort of like, sitting through a 1 hour YouTube thing on like how to get more engagement.
Yeah, exactly. Because now you're doing that, and that's where I've always kind of said, like, the thing is, it's like that's where like everybody sort of needs almost that assistant. I felt like that's always kind of how it was back in the olden days. If you had like old-fashioned, be like, you have the assistant there, to learn the skill, and so on. And it's like, I feel like at that point, I'm like, well, I almost kind of needed that, because there's so many of those little things that you could kind of like, pass off. I mean, that's why when you read it, if you ever get any of those manga special features and so on like that, they always talk about that. That's like, oh, it's just me, and then I have my one assistant, And back in the old days,
right.
They'd be there sharpening pencils, and cleaning brushes and all that kind of stuff, But nowadays, I feel like the assistant would probably be like, hey, here's a couple of pictures. You go, you know what I like to write, so you post those up on my page and so on, get some engagement, and I feel like that's almost like what the assistant would be for nowadays. Be like, hey, I'm gonna work on this. I need you to kind of, answer emails and so on like that. If it gets something you don't understand, well, obviously bring me on over. But for the most part, you know what's up. So here we go.
No, totally. Although if I had the dream, the unpaid intern, I would be like, I just want you to handle the website. Like, yeah. I'll do everything else if you just take the fucking website. Because it's like, I think another thing people know is like you have to like HTML is like, it's like. I don't know how to put it. It's like if you had like not a cat or a dog, but like I don't know, like a chinchilla. It's just a bizarre, it's bizarre. It has special needs. It has to be tweaked in a certain way. Like HTML is so hard, and then it has to do all these sort of like you have to be able for people to find the stuff, and you have to be able for people to buy the stuff. I have to sell digital things, and I also have to sell physical things, and I also have to, and then I have to put it in a put it in an appropriate box and hope that the label doesn't fall off. It's just like, so the thing is, like, I feel like when you do all this and you look and you see, like, when somebody is in a comic convention and they have a printed, stapled, book,
yeah,
I feel like, oh my God, like you have moved the earth to make this, and people don't, they just scroll on by to go,
whatever.
Buy fan art of Spider Woman.
Yeah, it's like, no, get away from well, that's why I've always felt with the Comic-Con, because I mean, like, they've kind of gotten to that point where, like, nowadays it's almost like, should you really just call them entertainment cons? Because let's be honest, there's probably not even 5% of the people here are comics anymore. Like, you know what I mean?
No, totally.
There's so little. It's like it's either fan art and video games and wrestling, and movies and TV and all this kind of stuff. And it's not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's almost got to the point where it's just they've jammed too many conventions into one, and they're still calling it Comic-Con, but it's not really a Comic-Con. So you get a lot of people walking by, be like, "Yeah, I'm not in the comics. I'm just here because my girlfriend's here." Like, it's kind of lame. And that's where I always fall off the line. I'd be like, well, that's okay because my book's a sitcom. You like sitcoms, don't you? Oh, I kind of like sitcoms. Come on over then.
Yeah, you know what? Actually, yeah, because you kind of I feel like you straddle a bunch of different fences. Because I had wondered if like one of your influences was anime. I mean, I feel like you've got a lot of the anime. What do you call that? Like filigree, like the effects and the sweat bubbles and the sort of like the little like visual cues that they use to sort of. But when you said Scott Pilgrim, I was like, of course, because it's not like it's not fully anime. It's like filtered anime. But I was like, oh, if you add that as a point of reference, that I totally get it. I totally see like where it landed. What else? So what artistically, what inspired you? Like, what were you like when you were learning to draw? What were you looking at and being like, all right, this.
Well, you know, it's one of the main ones I actually just looked at because I was like, because this kind of felt like it was. Do you remember the Clerks comic book that came out like '96 or something like that? Like that book, because it was straight black and white, and you know the drawings in it, they're great, but they're kind of cartoony and so on. So I use that one as kind of one of those ones. Like here's that, of course, Scott Pilgrim. Strangers in Paradise was also the other one that I always looked at a lot because the artwork in that one, I love the way that kind of is, the way that the characters look and everything like that. And the thing I like about that book is, I mean, there's a little bit of an overarching murder mystery and things like that kind of going on there, but for the most part, it's just like regular people's lives. It's like that's what that comic book is about. It's almost like sort of like you're jumping into. It's not necessarily maybe a full sitcom, but kind of a sitcom with drama elements and so on into it. And that's what I always liked about that book, and just the whole artwork and everything there. And then, of course, a little bit of anime influences and Batman, like the animated series, because Batman the animated series is always a good one because. Because in a sense, when you look at the cartoons, it's almost like how do you get it simplified, but it still looks really good in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. Reduce it down to its most basic elements, but it also has its own flavor.
Yeah.
Going back to Strangers in Paradise, I think the thing that because I worked in a comic book shop, I was really into indie comics, So I worked at a comic book shop in 1990, throughout the 90s.
So you had the golden age of comic book shops almost.
Oh my God! Can I do a crazy flex? This is so obnoxious, but I worked through the golden age of comics, and I was at a shop, so I got a lot of stuff. I made $14,000 a year, but I got all this inventory.
Yes.
And I was looking the other day, and I was like, I have it's really nice Hellboy. It was one of the first bound editions of Hellboy, and all the rest, I was like, oh, I should, they have these new library editions. I always thought, well, since I had that, I don't have to worry about it. Yeah. They have these new library editions. I was like, maybe I should look into getting these. Now, because they're a little older, they're a little on sale. So I was just going through, and then I saw that the version that I have, and it was $700, and I was like, holy shit, I'm rich. I could go send myself to space now. Yeah. But we're going to a comic shop. But I'm sorry, not to brag about my wise investments. So I followed a lot of indie comics, and I tried to get them from the store and tried to push them. And although I love indie comics, I love indie comics. It was a great time. Straight Bullets came out, Scud came out. Yep. Wonderful time for indies. There were also not great ones. And the thing that bugged me about a lot of indie comics was it was very I, the writer, and the character in the story, and I'm going to tell sort of my story, which is very authentic to my own experience, but maybe not interesting to people who aren't me.
Yep.
And there was a lot of that. There was a ton of that. I can't tell you how many times you would see somebody sort of peering out of a train or bus or plane, and sort of you'd see leaves on puddles, and sort of they would go into a reverie, which is fine. All comics are great, but Strangers in Paradise was an indie comic, and it was telling a story, and the story felt real, and it felt authentic, and it felt like these are real characters. But it isn't sort of and it may have been, but it didn't feel like it was the writer talking about his own experience in a way that was very insular. It was something anybody could read and sort of get in on, and just find themselves invested in it. And it was a fun story. It was personal, but also a great story.
Yeah.
That book is so great. It's such a it is a treasure from that time.
Oh, it really is. And as I said, the artwork in it, too. It just has probably some of my favorite art in, any book. And then to top it off, of course, there is, anime and so on kind of, influences. So I like Ranma 1/2. I like things, everything from Dragon Ball Z to Tenchi Muyo and all that kind of stuff. So, of course, in cartoons in general, too, whether it be Johnny Quest, whether it be the X-Men, the animated series, anything and everything there. All that kind of stuff I felt kind of molded together. And then to top it off is sitcoms, because that was another thing I always, when making movies, I was like, dude, I always want to make my own sitcoms and so on like that. That was one of those things, too. So I felt Pizza Boys, I can just treat, it's like a comic book's perfect place to treat it like a sitcom. You know what I mean? Make each episode its own standalone story. I try to make it. I feel like that still kind of throws a curveball, because it's there's just not enough comics that have unless they're old comics that have singular stories. Because mostly comics is always hey, here's an arc, Here's an arc.
Right.
You know, but it's like, I like the idea of like, hey, you know, you could literally pick up issue 9 and you don't really need like context for like.
No, everyone is a fresh start. Everyone,
yeah.
And the table resets.
Yeah, there might be little like continuation things in there, but not so much so that you're going to be like, it's not that kind of story where, you know, if you turn on like Arrow season 5, and even if you know who Green Arrow is, you're still going to be as confused as all can be at what's going on.
I think here's what I would say. I think the sitcom thing. I think you totally have the rhythm of sitcoms, but I think where sitcoms are sometimes frustrating, like where sitcoms can be frustrating is the sort of like the rat-a-tat-tat of the sort of like set up punchline, punchline. You know, like, and also things are so easy to, like, when you know, like when the person comes out at the beginning of the sitcom is like, oh, it's a very important weekend and my boss is coming over for dinner. I just hope nobody shows up in a gorilla suit because he's really afraid of gorillas.
Yeah.
You immediately know what the like. So like, Pizza Boy doesn't get anywhere near that. Like, I feel like
they have like that
rhythm.
Well, that almost seems like the like 70s sitcom. And I don't get me wrong, like, I love the full spectrum. Like, I love sitcoms from like 50s on up because, you know, I remember just like in the 90s, that was like when TV Land kind of was there, you know, and so on. So I just watched all this kind of like full variety, you know, every single decade and so on. Just, you know, all this stuff. And I know, and sitcoms kind of I think it's a term because, you know, there's so many different things. It's like, you know, you could have sitcoms that are kind of like that, like Laverne and Shirley style, maybe even feeling, you know, but you can also have sitcoms that, you know, then you got Seinfeld style. Then you have things that's even kind of like a little bit more modern, like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia and so on.
Yeah.
You know,
hey, did you watch WandaVision? What did you think of it?
You know, I haven't got around to it yet. I know I have that kind of there, and this thing I always feel like when it comes to TV shows, I like I'll see something like, man, I'd like to watch that, but I oddly don't watch as much TV anymore. I mostly just stick to, like, I feel like the time that I have is generally movies, and a lot of times older movies too. That's always the thing I get to, where one of these days I'll sit down and watch it, but I haven't got to it yet. You know, it's weird. It's like, if it was a movie, I would go see it like day one it came out, but for some reason when it's like on a television show, it's like it takes me forever to get to them, if I even do get to them. But I know that had like the old sitcom kind of flair to it, and when it started off, and then changed as it went on.
I'll do the heel turn nobody saw coming, but like I think they definitely wanted to sort of like thread that needle. Like they were trying to sort of like, the first few episodes are sort of meant to sort of evoke these sitcoms, and then and they're doing that thing where they're trying to sort of simulate the pattern. But this was my beef with like I don't know if you saw like La La Land, which I think like is trying to be like a modern take on the musicals, but they're not going to do it. Like, we're not going to actually sing well, and we're not going to do the dancing. Like, you're going to be two people who are, you know, well, one who clearly isn't a very good dancer, but like, you get it. And I think that like that is I think in order to parody something, you have to be able to sort of do it better than the source. So like, so I would say La La Land didn't, you know, kind of fails at that. And I thought like as a comparison, I really liked Hail Caesar, the Coen Brothers movie.
I saw it in theaters.
And oh yeah, fucking great. But that dance sequence that what's his name? Channing Tatum.
Channing Tatum, yeah.
First of all, like it's like he's playing a kind of like he's a sailor, and they're kind of winking, like it's a very like oh, we're gay, and like they're like the movie is winking at you like, look we're all in on this joke, but they don't sort of like, it's not a parody, because like that dance sequence is as good as any dance sequence in any, you know, Busby Berkeley musical. So I think like that's the thing. If you're gonna do a parody, so if you in WandaVision, if you're gonna sort of like evoke these, like you it's not just enough to get the patter. It's not just enough to sort of like do the facsimile. You have to actually, you know, you have to tell jokes that are funny, that work in that, you know, that are limited in that way, but work as well as the source material. And that was my beef with WandaVision. Like, great ambition, maybe not totally, you know, maybe like clearly had a lot of love for sitcoms, but maybe not the skill at making them.
Yeah, well, you know, and I'll use a music example for that. Is that's like Steel Panther. Like, they do the hair metal kind of like, in a sense that they're a comedy band, but at the end of the day, like, their music is like, they're like almost like the best hair metal band, because they've almost absorbed all the years of hair metal together, and they make these songs. And I'll say this: they're the kind of music that if you turn that on, you didn't know, like, you know, English, whatever, you would listen to that song and be like, man, this is a great song. And then if you happen to get the lyrics, then it's a great song that has comedy in it and so on. I think that's almost like how you're supposed to do it. And it's the same thing with, like, you know, comedy and all kinds of stuff. Like, really good comedy also should be backed with also being like really good at like whatever genre you're kind of doing or whatever style. And instead of just being sometimes just a straight up like, haha, remember this, and kind of going too much into that.
Exactly.
Where it's just that is what a sitcom is, but that's almost forget about that and just try to be really good at what you are, and then sprinkle the comedy in later. I don't know. That's why I always think that a lot of times some of the funniest stuff a lot of times doesn't even come from comedies. Like drama movies sometimes have some of the best bits ever in them because they're not riding on having a joke every 3 lines. It's like when they have a joke, they're gonna savor it and then throw it out there.
Yes, I think horror is sort of like horror hits that very well too. I think because I think tension, like I can't speak to this very well because I'm not educated on it, but my understanding is that the sort of like if you were just to look at the mechanics of a joke and you were to look at the mechanics of a suspense scene, like if you were to graph them, they're very similar. Like it requires tension and then release and then like resolution. Yeah. So it makes sense that in these sort of breaks in horror, they're perfect moments for comedy because like you're sort of like you're loosened up anyway to laugh, or you're loosened up anyway to feel anything. Because you've been so like jerked around. And I think like I think like the what was the thing I was watching recently? It was like a little grim, or not grim, but just very serious. And then like there would be these like just like when the laughs hit, you're like, oh, the perfect example is Parasite. Like because I feel like Parasite is a fucking thriller, and yet it was also the funniest movie I saw that year.
Yeah, see, and that's why I think that works out well in those kind of favors because like you weren't going in expecting that. I mean, that was like the way that was like Wolf of Wall Street too, because it was the trailer sold it like you were going in for like a very hard. I expected it to be like literally like Wall Street, the Oliver Stone movie, just like a different variation of that. And I like that movie a lot, but I was like, and then when you get in there, you're like, oh my gosh, no, Martin Scorsese's like a 70-year-old dude writing some of the best or putting together some of the best comedy like known to mankind here. You know what I mean? Like, I remember this like. Quentin Tarantino made that statement. He's like, well, I don't want to be that old director, like still directing movies. So I'm like, dude, like, do we have to pull Martin out for you? Like, look how old he is, and he's still throwing out movies that are like some of his top tier ones. I mean, even like The Departed, I know that's like almost 20 years ago by now, but that's still like one of those ones. Like, he's at least in his 60s by that point, almost.
No, the guys. I mean, and also I think like there's a like. Well, let me tie this to a question. I think there's a moment where you figure out like. Or Martin Scorsese figures out how to make a Martin Scorsese movie. You know what I mean? And then when you finally crack that, when you're not trying to make he's not trying to make a Kurosawa movie and he's not trying to make his influences, he's just trying to make. And then when you figure that out, then it's sort of like then you start to learn how to like build off that. Yeah. Which is where I would kind of maybe argue, look, nobody's a bigger Tarantino fan than me, or maybe there are, but I'm a big fan.
Yeah, I'm a big fan too. So.
But I also kind of feel like from maybe Inglourious Basterds, which was like truly one of his best movies. I think maybe after that he starts to like. It's like I keep wanting him to like grow a little past where you're at. Like nobody can make a Tarantino movie like Tarantino. But on the same token, like don't get stuck just making Tarantino movies. Because I think like when you think about Jackie Brown. Nobody after Pulp Fiction was expecting Jackie Brown. No. And that's what makes Jackie Brown like such an absolute delight. Well, and also it's not.
Oh, I was just going to say, Jackie Brown's, that's the one that I remember the first time I saw. I'm like, this one's good, maybe not their best one and so on, but the more I watch that movie becomes, it climbs like the tier. Like it's in my top 3 favorite Tarantino ones for sure. I love that one so much.
Oh God, no, totally, me too. And also same thing. Like the first time I saw it, I was like, this wasn't exactly what I was expecting. And then like watch it again 4 years later, and you're like, holy shit, this is fucking great. Yeah. Robert Forster, what the fuck do?
Yeah. It's one of those ones that like kind of builds on. I mean, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's kind of like that too. I remember first time I watched it, I really liked it, but the second time I watched it, the third time I watched it, I started liking it more. Then, you read the book to go along with it, and it really adds all these extra details. So like
yeah, so I just think that like he's a director that I think could stand to like don't pause where you're at. Because I know everybody kind of wants him to do the next Kill Bill. Like the Kill Bill 20 years later. And I do too. I love the Kill Bills movies, but I don't know, like go deeper. Don't go, don't keep repeating or not repeating because Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is not like Django but don't stagnate constantly. Stay uncomfortable, make it hard. Either way,
I mean that's
there's your free advice.
That's like Stanley Kubrick, though. I mean, because you think about like Stanley Kubrick, if you didn't tell somebody, like if you just like laid out his movies, I feel like the average person, they never saw like the title credits or anything like that. You would not piece together that that's the same guy putting all those movies together. Like Clockwork Orange and 2001: A Space Odyssey are like so radically different from like even Spartacus and Barry Lyndon and The Shining, like none of these in Full Metal Jacket, like they're all so way different from each other. And I think, it's like that kind of thing that you can kind of make whatever you want. They don't have to always have like that vibe and that feel and everything like that. You know what I mean? Like, and then, and I think with Tarantino, what it is maybe it's just that kind of break. It's like that thing where like a musician says like, you know what, we're done. Let's have the final tour and so on. And then I think they go sit home for like a couple of years twiddling their thumbs and go, this is terrible. Why did we ever do that?
I was reading a book on the making of Chinatown, and they were talking. There's an interview, or they're repeating an interview with Roman Polanski, and I guess like early on they were like, Roman Polanski, you did like the Vampire Hunters, and now you're doing this sort of like this noir movie. Are you afraid of getting like pigeonholed into like these sort of genre movies? Mm-hmm. And his answer was like, I think if you're a good director, a director wants to direct every genre. You know what I mean? Like, what you want to do is tell a story in everyone. You want to do a Western. You want to do a science fiction. You want to do, and I think that's the secret, because like I think that's the Kubrick thing you're saying. Yeah. Like like I like right off of oh man, I can't remember. Is it? Sorry, my memory fails me. But to go from whatever the movie was before The Shining to then like, oh, I'm going to do a horror movie, and
Barry Lyndon. I think that's the one. Yeah.
Having done 2001, like to just like you're saying, like it's just you wouldn't even recognize that these are on the same continuum. Yeah. They did a great one of our museums, I think it was LACMA, had an exhibit on him, and they had his sort of research for movies. And I think there was a Napoleon movie that he didn't make.
Yeah, because he always wanted to. Yeah, that was like
So they showed like all the research that he had done for it, and like that. I mean, it was research he had done for all of his movies, but then including that was all this movie for a movie we never saw, which was like, it was just like it was fascinating. I mean, because like all the stuff that goes into that. But of course, if you're going to do that, you have to like each time you're starting completely over.
Yeah, you are, and I think that's kind of it. You just sort of change it up, and so, I mean, I'll even say that's like what I like about doing Pizza Boy, especially in kind of like in a sense the way that I was sort of doing it, where each one's its own episode. I have the same characters, but I could literally choose a different style, because, at first it's like, okay, here's this kind of sitcom style, it has a little bit of video games, a little bit of comics and movies and so on like that. But then like, I can do an issue where it's all about, movie making, or I can do an issue where it's all about lifeguarding, or I can even throw a horror episode in there that like, just changes up the dynamic, where they're kidnapped by, two 11-year-old girls just for the, it's funny, but it's also like a horror. Then I could jump into the laser tag one where it's like, okay, now I can give it that Apocalypse Now feel that I always want, but how do I work that in there? Well, we'll use it with laser tag.
I love the laser tag. I mean, I love the one with the two 12-year-old girls. The comic convention one as well. Yeah. Or is it anime convention? I apologize. Yes, same thing for me. Like Gunn, although ostensibly about supervillains doing supervillain thing, like I think part of like, because the opposite of what you're describing is when you like you keep telling the same stories. You feel it's like how I feel like Matt and Trey must feel, or the Simpsons creators, where it's like, oh fuck, now they got to go to the school and now they got to do this. I don't know. Maybe they don't feel that way. So I'm projecting. Yeah. But like you never want to feel like straitjacketed in to your work, or like I have to, it's a grind. And I feel like the stuff that you're interested in, like for me personally, while I was working on, so the latest arc is called Slaughterball. It's like a Death Race 2000. Like all the supervillains participate in this like crazy sport where they're paired up in cars trying to get this time bomb across the country. So that's the premise, which is fine. And I wanted it to be like, I wanted it to have like an exploitation movie feel to like the way but around the same time I was reading a book about Orson Welles and his last unfinished masterpiece. And I was like, oh, it'd be great if if ESPN wanted somebody to just film this, and they get this sort of like Orson Welles character. So like it's a character that's sort of existing, but then you get to sort of like insert it with the stuff that you're interested in. And then like for the second issue, there's this big fight scene in a mall, and I was really like, I was fascinated by vaporwave. This sort of like, is it an art music? Is it a music style? Yeah. And like a big thing that they have is sort of like just like zoned out mall music and like these images of sort of like malls after the apocalypse. And I was like, oh, I can set dress with that. Like I can make the scenery look like that and sort of import that imagery. So sorry, long boring response to like, yeah, the stuff that you're interested in, if you can find a way to marry it to the work, if you can find a way to like just keep injecting the stuff that you're interested in, into the work. Then on top of that, not only is it fresh for you and you're not like, this fucking grind, but like to the readers, they're like, like, this is so crazy. Well, like I think they like it too, because it just puts this gloss over everything of like, like it's not, they're not just engaging with what they think they're engaging with. It's like a Trojan horse. All this other stuff comes in, that I think they are tickled by as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's why. Yeah. Actually, I'll say in Gun 4, 5, and 6, what I like about that is, you're kind of led into the story. You're like, okay, cool. So we got the slaughter ball thing and so on. But like each issue almost starts going like completely different places. It's this, the storyline's continuing on, but like it changes up in each one. It's like, oh my gosh, it's almost very radical. Like the locations they're at and the characters we're going with and everything in there. And I think that's what makes it kind of cool. I mean, even the art style feels. I mean, still got of course the water painted color, but like each one is from one. You got almost like the 70s kind of car chase action movie sort of vibe. Then next thing you know, you got all those color waves coming in with like the what was it? Thomas Wade? No, not Thomas Wade. That's a console. But like like that and so on, and then as it's just going on, you just kind of keep getting these different vibes and feels and so on, changing up the whole like dynamic and look and so on. It's not that where sometimes I feel it's almost like in anime. I mean, granted, like a lot of times it's not always in like the manga books, but like sometimes like in a good anime show, when they wait for the writer to catch up to where they're at and they don't just take off and just say, we got it covered, we'll figure it out from here. You'll get a lot of those, in a sense, like the filler episodes, and that's where like you get Dragon Ball Z, where like you have 30 episodes of Goku fighting Frieza because they're waiting for the next book to come out. So they milk it like ridiculously, but that's also got to be like, if you're the guy having to draw that over and over again, like, well, what we coming into work every day? What we draw? We're drawing Goku fighting Frieza. Got 20 minutes of them charging up today. Oh, okay. Can we at least reuse some of that stuff we shot? We put together last week. Yeah, we're gonna reuse some of it, so it's okay.
You know what? That's a great premise, because I love the idea of Game of Thrones doing the same thing, where instead of just sort of like, hey, we're gonna finish it up, they were waiting for George R.R. Martin, so like every season is just like them having to like, oh Jesus fucking Christ, let's make frost giants. I don't know.
Yeah. just holding on it.
Yeah. No, I think partially because it takes you so long to do the issues. I think like I'm going through that now, and I when the pandemic started, I've never been a big con guy. I don't do well at conventions, so I did a few, and then like I don't mind like I just like, if you don't make any money at them, it's fine. It's a marketing cost, like I'm out there. Like,
that's how I always kind of look at it. If anything, you're getting your name out. That's the most important thing. Right. 10,000 people just saw your banner, even if they kind of question what it is. Like they at least looked your general direction for a split second.
Also, like I'm getting older, so like you pay an extra $60 and you can sit, instead of having to just walk around all day as an attendee. So like I'm paying for the chair.
Yeah.
Either way, but like like I also just like I shied away from doing more because like I don't want to travel. Like if it's a local one, I don't mind doing it, but it's a lot to travel and then be like I'm barely going to cover parking on this, let alone the cost to be here and accommodation. So. Sorry. As the pandemic started, I joined a bunch of groups where people were like comic creators were like in the absence. These are guys who did conventions and did well at them, and sort of like in the absence of conventions, they just wanted to sort of like keep connected to other creators. And so that put me in touch with more creators that I had ever really been in touch with. I felt like I was always in an ivory tower doing my own thing, my own very weird thing, very far away from the rest of comics. And then this sort of enabled me to contact more of them. And then when I did that, I think like when you are like, when you're an artist, it's like being at ladies' night. Like there are all these writers who are like, like there are tons of writers out there looking, and then like, not a ton of artists, and the artists are usually very booked up. Yeah. So once I met a lot of these creators, like there were opportunities that were coming around, and like I got the chance to do a couple of anthology pieces, and like for me that was cool because I had I started working on Gun, I've only worked on Gun, so it was a chance to sort of do non-Gun stuff. But I was already sort of like in overtime on delivering the comic, which already takes too long. And then it was like, oh, I'm doing these other like little side projects. So like it's been such an amazingly long time between issues, and this last one is the longest of all. Plus there was a pandemic, and that was kind of a weird thing.
Yeah.
So for me, like literally this issue I've been working on for a year, and I always joke like, oh, it takes me a year, but this time it really did. Yeah. And like, so looking back over 12 months, like the artwork at the first couple of pages, like it's just, I've grown as an artist, as you do, But I think also for me, because like I was doing these other projects and kind of stretching in different directions, like I think like a lot changed.
Yeah,
and
you're
so,
definitely
like,
you're developing all kinds of new abilities just because the challenge of almost, because you know what you want, but the challenge sometimes is when somebody else says, "Hey, could you do this?" and you go, "Well, I've never drawn that before, so I'll figure it out."
Yeah, exactly. And I think like once you sort of like, I think that would happen for me is like you keep trying at something, and I think frequently like it's like the baseball analogy: you swing and you miss, and you swing and you miss, and you swing and you miss. And I feel like I was a swing and miss guy a lot. But then every now and then, when like the bat cracks, you're like, oh wow, I did it.
Yeah.
I turns out I can do this. And once you get a taste for that, then you're more adventurous going forward.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of this stuff was like, I think writers in particular, because what do they have to do? They just have to sit there and dream it up.
Yeah.
Like, you don't.
That's what I mean. Like, and I say this to speak kind of being like, I think of myself first and foremost as a writer, but it's like I always felt like that's the easiest part of any job I've ever had in multimedia when it comes down to is writing. Like, if I could write all day and didn't have to do anything else, you're set. You know what I mean? That's like having a job that's literally like having a job where you do all the cool stuff, but you don't do any of the work. That's kind of how I feel writing is. And I'm not putting it down, but I think it's like, that's one of those ones I feel like you got to be kind of honest. Like, that's sort of what it is. You do all the fun without having to like ever like really like do any heavy lifting.
Totally. And I don't want to like, I value the writing. Like, I value the writing. I do. I don't think that it's insignificant, but I also know how much work both requires. Yeah. And that's the sort of like, I mean, I think that like for creators like us, where it's like, it's not just we're both, but we're also like, so the lettering, like you're talking about the lettering area. Like it's so cool to be able to like adjust the like, hey, I can reduce a little bit of what's being said here to sort of like fit the page a little better, and like this little piece of artwork that like I know nobody's going to notice, but there's like something I like in the background, and I don't want to cover it up with a bubble, and you can kind of like, and then I think you can sort of reshape how the, like it's going in and like it's like writing a tweet almost, where you're limited in space, so you have to like come up maybe better ways of saying things, and I think sometimes that makes the writing slightly better. Mm-hmm. So like being able to do it all, you're just sort of like, you have a lot more control. Like you can toggle you can switch all the knobs and do all that, which is awesome and amazing. But you also know how much work each requires. And like I get stuck, like, oh, this line just sounds cheesy, or I want this to sound more natural and it just sounds like exposition, or, all that stuff that writers go through, which is a struggle. But at the same token, like when you are like, when you are like 12 pages in on a 38-page story, and it's been 6 months and you're totally late, and you're like struggling over getting this fucking face right, like oh man, like it's just a different kind of nightmare. Or like I had to, like, no spoilers, but like I had to draw ships, shuttles,
spacecraft,
which I'd never. Yeah, so I'd never had to do that before, which I love, like the look of it. But it's a lot different trying to dream it up.
Oh, I bet too. Yeah, especially when you got to think of it.
Here's my challenge: that send the Pizza Boys to space. Like,
well, geez, it worked at Fast and Furious 9. I feel like we could find a way.
Yeah, I found I think like a easy and believable way to do it. But then the challenge is like you have to come up with, because it's that thing I was saying, you have to come up with your version of it. It's not just sort of like, they hijacked the NASA space shuttle. It's like you have to like, well, no, if I could design a space shuttle, what would it look like? And if I could, if they're at a space station, what does that look like? So that is sort of like, it's fun, but it's also like, it's hard. Like you have to like, and then like again, like each of these things you get a little bit better. Like, like way back when I was starting, like, oh, I drew Storm from the X-Men well.
Yeah.
Now it's like,
in one pose, you're like, man.
You have to sort of like draw this sort of like, this connective tube between two space station orbs, and you have to sort of do it in perspective, and also make sure you show the planet in the background and the curvature of the Earth. It's like I don't know how to do any of that.
Yeah,
and you figure it out.
You figure it out, and I think that's also one of the other things that makes, like, if you kind of compare someone who just does straight up drawing, they don't do comic books, but they just do drawings, and they sort of focus on what they're best at. Maybe they're just doing kind of like bust shots, right. Characters and so on. Like, because I feel like the one thing that's nice about comic books is, even if like maybe you're not the greatest like artist in general, you still have to draw like everything in the world in a sense. At the end of the day,
Yeah.
you design everything. So like even if you never drawn, something like that would seem simple as like a mailbox or a trash can or something like that, you got to draw all those like things like that to kind of create the rooms, to kind of create the outside, to keep the landscape and so on. Because that's something that like I will say that's always one of my like pet peeves of certain like indie comics is when they don't have backgrounds or anything like that. Like that always kind of you'll see somebody like they draw characters real well, but their backgrounds are pretty darn barren. In some books you're even going like, dude, where are they at? Like, are they floating in space? Like literally, you know what I mean? Like, because that's the thing. It's like I feel like it's not that the backgrounds have to be perfect. It's not that they have to be in perspective. But I like the details in it. It's like a perfect example is like I'm looking at your room right here. I love the fact of like, in a sense, I've always loved the way that people's like offices and desks look because that right there, you could almost learn so much about a certain person because you'll see like what's the action figures they got there, what's the posters they have up on the wall, what books do they have in their shelf, what's is there photos, is there all like so much stuff you could learn about somebody just from that, and I always think that's kind of cool, and that's how I almost try to always approach like when I do backgrounds myself is I like to add those extra details in there that almost like there is more to it, even if I can throw a joke in the background that maybe you might not see, but it's there anyways or something, just to have those details. They don't have to be all perfect or anything like that, but at least it's filled.
Yeah, no, and you know what, you bring up the like to me like I think like people think drawing is difficult in these ways, but like for me the thing that I'm always getting stuck with is how to dress people, because as a guy who isn't particularly stylish, I think like a lot of comic dudes, I'm like shorts, t-shirt, or life.
Yeah.
So like, but you have to like, and you do this range of people. Like I think Emma Frost is such a great example because she's this very classy. She's a character who's classy and yet but there's always like a little bit of a BDSM kind of like twist to it.
Yeah.
But but never looks she always looks posh. And I think there's this sort of like she would wear something you would see on a runway in a fashion show, which is like when describing it again, writer's job so easy. Yeah, that sounds great. But when you actually have to like, oh wait, what is that? What does this person wear? And I think like I can speak well enough to like middle-aged men like me. Like I can draw their attire pretty well. Like I gotta like throw some Vans on them. Like maybe cargo shorts. You're done. But like when it's like when it's a young person who dresses fashionably and sort of like like I don't know, like Billie Eilish, what do these kids even like? And I think like, but each time, like the thing that gets me hung up the most is earrings, because I think, as we've seen in a bunch of movies, like earrings also commit to a lot about a character. Like I don't know if you saw Sorry to Bother You, but like the girl had those like big chunky earrings that would like carry a message on them. Like they would like say little like catchphrases and things, and I was like, oh man, I'm really not paying enough attention to earrings. So like again, only to say like these are such small minor things, and I think when you're writing a like comic book about like supervillains in a death race, you're not thinking
like the costumes, but also too, it's like you always gotta think, because that's what I think too. When you make a costume, do you want to make it so detailed? Because you're gonna have to draw it multiple times. Like that's always the other thing too, is I get that feeling of like almost like an animation where it's just like you want to make it so that you could continuously. That's why like even in Pizza Boys, I kind of keep them all in somewhat casual outfits because I know that I'm gonna have to just draw it over and over and over again. It's fine for like a certain page, for someone to wear that, but you want to make sure the outfits aren't so like intense that like next thing you know you're like, oh, I have to draw this ballroom gowns every time. Jeez, why did I make it so much? You know what I mean?
No, I did. I did a leather, like a biker jacket. I wanted to have like a biker. Like my characters they're like off-duty supervillains anyway, so they're wearing polos, garbage. But like, I wanted to have one scene of him in like a biker outfit because he's in this sort of race. You want somebody who looks like that. And like, I was like, also a thing I'm terrible at is like, again, because it takes so long between issues, I'll forget what like the orientation of the twirl on his costume will shift from left to right. I'll forget, like, is it a pointed sleeve or a, half moon cut? So I started just drawing like a little sketch out of the beginning of just like, this is what the costume looks like, and just refer back to this. And the first time I did the jacket, like, he was like, had all this contrast stitching and all this piecing, and there was like a little, like the little thing that slid over the pocket. And like, after 2 pages of that, you're like, fire this guy. This is insane. Put him in a black t-shirt.
Yeah. How can we get him to take the jacket off? Well, it is like, you kind of get those jackets and so on like that, and then just like, oh, okay, let's get this, especially those leather jackets where you got the details and you got the belts and the straps. And all that kind of stuff. You kind of, there's all those little things in there that you kind of get going. But this is what I'll say, though. I always think of Tank Girl when I think of those kind of things, because this is something I've always liked about Tank Girl, is that her tattoos continuously change from panel to panel. And I think that as part of a joke, but I always feel that's kind of one of those ones where it's like, see, it doesn't matter that much. You don't have to be 100% accurate. It's Tank Girl has tattoos. At the end of the day, does it matter exactly which tattoos they are? No, because they just, but she has tattoos.
I gave a character sleeves, and boy, was that a mistake.
Oh,
it's not just like, even if you only draw it once and then just sort of like copy and paste it over all the rest, like it's hard. Like that's a lot of tattoos are a lot of illustrative work.
Yep, that's why I've never given. I don't think I've given. If I would only give character tattoos if they were only in one panel. I think that'd be about it.
One last gripe.
Yes.
I don't know. Cell phones. It's not that cell phones are hard to draw. It's a square. But like cell phones in hands, I don't know what it is about that. It is continually like, no matter what the angle, I have to look it up or take a reference shot, which is
I do. I take a picture of myself. That's
I feel like every time I draw them, they just look like, it looks like the person, their hand isn't working properly, or they're like, like the knuckles are. It is a disaster for me every time, and it's one of the most simple, basic things. Art, man, harder than you think, although also surprisingly easy.
Well, it's like that's the way I sort of feel of cars. I always, for some reason, seem to have cars. Like, it doesn't seem like that, but like, you draw a car over and over, and it's just like, okay. And like, I used to just go out and I'd find the car and I'd just take circular pictures around it, click, 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 and then I'd know what the car looked like from every single angle. Because sometimes you go to look up a car and you realize they only take them like turning down that same, like taking that same left every time. It's like, can I get it? I can't remember what each one looks like and so on. Like, I know the car's kind of the same on the other side, but I don't want that same 3/4. Like, I need a kind of that. And that's what makes having the 3D models nowadays you can find in the car, so you can just spin it around, go, okay, that's what it looks like there, that's what's going to look like there, and so on. But sometimes cars could be like, if you have too many of them, it's like, oh gosh, here we go, drawing cars and drawing circular, everything about a car and all its little details and so on just always kind of adds up. But yeah.
No, cars are. So for you, when was it? What issue did you feel like okay, I've got it? Like to borrow the car metaphor, the wheels are hitting the road. Like telling the stories that I want to tell, and they're looking the way that I want them to look, and I feel like I'm finally.
Issue 5 is, I feel, to me, where I felt like I really had like, okay, this is pretty solid, and I feel like it's kind of all dialed in by about this point.
Wow, that's good. And then, so how long have you been doing it? Was that like 2 years in, or?
Because I did pretty good, because I want to say I almost did the first run of the books in about like issues 1, 2, 3, and 4, in about a tad bit over a year, I think.
Oh wow!
That
is amazing.
Yeah, like I kind of did it like, because I feel like if all things go according to plan and not too much stuff gets in the way, or other stuff like that, I can do an issue in about 3 months. Like that's a pretty reasonable. Still doing other stuff, still kind of being able to do that. But sometimes every once in a while things come up, and the next thing you know, an issue takes 6 or 7 or so months. Just because things just kind of get in the way and you just run out of the time, and and so on. In one issue, I remember issue 10, I was like so on fire, and I literally just kind of came off issue 9 doing really good, that issue 10, I want to say I did that in almost about 2 months. Like I just had that one knocked out. Like I was just coming hardcore back. And then issue 11, I think, and 12 took me much longer to do. So that kind of, that's where the trade-off was. But yeah,
it spins out in the wash.
But by issue 5, I felt like I kind of had it down as far as getting the drawings going. That's one of my favorite issues, anyways, to kind of like sell, because it's like, I call it's the death of a television issue.
Yeah.
And it's just like that one. It's like, I feel like for a lot of people, everybody's kind of had that TV that they sort of grew up with that they really liked a lot. And it's like, some people, I guess, don't think about it as much. But to me, it's like a TV was always, it's like, think about it, you probably look at a TV more than you look at your own like family members. It's there and so on. So I just think the idea of this, like really like expanding that out, like how much love can be for a television set and so on. I like that one quite a bit. And I felt by then, the drawings were getting kind of dialed in, the look and so on. It was sort of there from about that point, I kind of feel. Not saying that the ones before, because I just kind of went through and kind of, just sort of not really like remastered them, but just double checked them again just to kind of make sure. It's amazing how many more grammar mistakes you can always find.
Oh, yeah.
You think you caught them all, but then there's always like, there's an extra comma missing or something. So when I put them out for just getting new prints out for single issues and so on, and new prints for the graphic novels, you know, reading through 1, 2, 3, and 4, it's like, you know, as far as it is, like, you know, the artwork kind of, you could see where it's like kind of finding its foothold, but I feel the writing and all that stuff still kind of solid and stuff there. It's not like one of those ones, because some people have a hard time, like, they'll have a book that's like 5 years old, and then they're like, oh man, that's like almost so different from me now. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Right. No, I understand. Like, I think it's hard to look back. I think we have to, because like you're saying, you have to put them in collected editions. Yeah. How is your, like, are you like inventory? Like, is that a nightmare for you, or do you for me, inventory, like, I just do not sell enough to print in these sort of like amazingly high print runs. So I'm going, so most of Gun has been like at 100 or less. Oh. So you know, like, and some of those, I mean, like, the first issue, so I'm outside of Diamond, so like you don't have the sort of buffer of previews, you know, and people just ordering them from shops. Yeah. So I reached out to a bunch of shops, and I was able to sell a fairly decent amount that way by reaching out to them. But then on the second issue, like, it was like less than 50. I mean, it was less than 20. You know, like, so I was like, well, this is clearly not working. And then slowly after 20, like after issue 2, I think if you stick around enough, I think people start kind of like, well, what's going on over here? And then like on issue 4, I started up a new series. So like, you know, you get a little bit of a boost there. But so like the first issue was Kickstarted, so I had like 2,000 of those. Oh my gosh. Issue 2, you know, I know. I every apartment I like, oh, it's so much fun carrying my broken dreams, and they're so heavy is the thing. So like issue 2, like I think I printed less than 50, and then like all of those are gone. And then, you know, then of course when you have these series, you have to sort of like, and people are so weird because like even though you can sort of sell everything digitally, like you have these diehards who will not buy something if it isn't printed. And then also like they insist they have to, like, because like I was like, oh, I'll have a trade edition, I don't have to reprint the early issues, you know, like yeah. If I just get the trade, but these guys are such, not guys, these people are such sticklers. I mean, you know what, I'm a comic fan too. I love these are my people, but it's such a fucking nightmare keeping on top of this, because like I don't have the money to print, you know, 1,000, and also, or the storage space, you know, know, in the hopes that over the next 5 years. So do you get dinged on inventory, or do you have that sort of like dialed in now?
I got it dialed in enough because this is what I kind of learned, because before I was doing a lot of times when it came down to prints, I printed a handful of single issues out before, but I mostly always stuck to like my graphic novels and so on. And then I was kind of thinking about the last Comic-Con I did one in Lodi, California. It was kind of my test run one, since we haven't had a Comic-Con in a year and a half almost. So I was like, I'm going to use this, my test run there. And the one thing I was thinking was like, you know what? I don't really have single issues. I think I need some single issues, because the only downfall is I didn't have that, like, almost like the cheap item in a sense. Because, you know, like a graphic novel, it's like, you know, they're looking, I'm like, I'm selling for $15, but it's like one of those ones, I think some people, it's like, well, I don't really know who this guy is. I mean, it sounds cool and all, but, you know, if I had like just single issues for like, hey, here you go, here's a single issue, $5 or something like that, boom, I feel like there's that little bit, like, you're not even thinking about, like, yeah, I'll give your book a try for that. So what I've done, I'm coming up to the Stockton Con, because the downfall is a lot of times it's like, well, I got 12 issues, and I would love to have them all in print, but I don't want to print out like, you know, 50 copies of each one and have like this ridiculous amount. But I went to Indie Planet this time, which kind of does the print on demand, which is nice to have anyways for like the graphic novel, especially if someone says like, hey, I want your book. You can just go, hey, here you go. There you go. There it is. It's, you know, reasonably priced enough. The shipping and handling is about the only thing that makes it a little bit more pricey on there, but whatever. You know, it's still, it's still pretty good all in all, you know, but I realized, I'm like, oh, wait a second. I could just order like, you know, 10 or 20 of each issue, the single ones, and not have to have like a minimum of like 50 or something silly like that, where I just got this copious amount that I need to get. So I just did that. So it's like I got my books, you know, and then I got enough single issues that, hey, here they are. At least I got, you know, if someone wants that, because some people just also, they like single issues more than they like graphic novels. There's just, I've seen that a couple times too. Yeah. Because I used to just,
or they'll do both.
Yeah.
You know, but like you can never abandon single issues entirely.
No.
And that is sort of.
Because for me, I guess I was trying to simplify. Like, what's the simplest, easiest way? I'll just go with the graphic novels. That will be the easy way, and so on. But now it's kind of like, no, you know, I should bring those kind of single issues back, you know, and so on, and have more than just like a handful of just random kind of versions that I got. So now I got them all in single issue and so on, you know, for the next We gotta do the one in Stockton. So I'll have the single issues. I'll have all the 3 of the graphic novel books. I've printed out T-shirts and some extra merchandise and so on. So just to kind of like, use that so that I have a variation of prices and so on. Because it's almost like you sort of need that, like, in a sense, I always feel like the cheap item and so on like that. Where you could just, someone like, they just got $5 on their hand. Hey, here you go. Here you go. Here you go.
And I think people are also tentative about, I mean, I'm one of those people. Like I love going through the artist alley, and I love like kind of taking a chance on things. But you also like, at the end of the day, you're still like I don't want to buy something, get through about like you buy a trade paperback. Yeah. You get through 10 pages. You're like, this is great. It's not my thing. And then like, what do I do? I throw it out. You have sort of like.
I paid $25 for it, so I'm not getting rid of it now.
Yeah. So I can understand it's like with anything, you I'll pick up a single issue, and if I like it, you track the person down. Like it's not that hard.
Yeah, it's got the information in there. So.
Well, I'll tell you what saved my bacon on that was that Kickstarter. I did the Kickstarter for the first issue, which I thought was just going to be kickstarting the full series, and it did well enough that I was able to print at a real comic book printer. I thought I was going to get into Diamond. Diamond, it turns out, is it's hard. They're a tough wall to scale.
Yeah.
So I was planning on that. I'll just be like an independent distributor. I'll be an independent publisher, and they will just distribute my comic, and this will be my life now.
Yeah.
And then that didn't quite go as planned, or at all as planned. And so I still have that inventory. That's sort of I think I probably sold. I don't know if it was 2,000. I printed 2,000. I might have up till now sold 500.
Yeah.
Over 7 years. So I have tons of these number ones, which I can also sell for because a Kickstarter covered it, so I can sell them for $3 or $2, and it's just sort of hey, do you just want to check this out? Here you go. It's at no loss to me. And then like you said, it's good to have on the table. It's good to have something at the low end. It's good to have something like you said, shirts. I think I don't wrap my head around enough is merchandising, because I think that is kind of it's a hidden area where you can sort of that's what pays for a trip, a con.
Yeah.
You may not necessarily be able to do it just with the prices of books and things, but you got enough. You sell 4 or 5 $20 T-shirts. You covered your table.
Yeah, you pay for the table and so on. Well, and the way I go about merch is I try to treat it like if I was a band. I look at because a lot as long as a band's certain bands don't have it down right, but a lot of bands that they got their merch tables down right, where they got the cool shirts, they got all the weird bells and whistles and so on. So I feel like I try to have a mixed match as much as you can of that, and just have that kind of variety and so on to kind of to make it well, because beyond as far as even just because generally for the most part at Comic-Cons I've only really sold mostly graphic novels and some other stuff, and I've done pretty good at that, but I feel like if you can add that extra layer of all kinds of extra things in there, there might be some of that person be like they almost might not be a person that reads comic books, but they might like that T-shirt, and that's what they'll kind of get.
That's the thing. Yeah, totally. In fact, one of the most loyal customers or fans I've had is the person who just liked the tee. I had a Fighting Is My Monday tee.
Yeah.
And she just was tickled by it.
They still love it. They like the saying, they like the the character, they like the picture and everything, and that's all kind of all it is. Or it's I have those pizza cutters that are literally pizza boys, pizza cutters, and a bottle opener. I sell a lot of those to people that you could tell that probably would never pick up a comic book. Not saying like that, but that's just not their jam. But they're like, dude, this is so cool.
No, my friend Ed, the guy that I did the mural with, that's his thing. It's where you can try to there are things. It doesn't have to be the comic necessarily. Mm-hmm. It can be things within, like you're saying about the pizza cutters. It can be things like that. You extract it out and you put it on a T-shirt. I understand. I'm not going to go around wearing the image eye or something. It's not cool. But if there's I had this I was trying to bury this shirt in the backgrounds. I have just secondary characters because I lived out east, and there was this. I would walk by this sandwich board and it was catfish tacos, and I don't know why, but every time I walked by that I was just tickled, and I had this drawing of this it's a taco and it's just got the 2 little catfish, whatever those are, mustaches sticking out of it. And I was just throw that on a T-shirt, and I think people may not necessarily want a gun comic T-shirt, but I think they would want a catfish taco T-shirt. So just figure out those ways of sort of of the stuff that's sticky in that way.
Yeah, that kind of I feel like the things, it has 2 purposes type stuff is almost what I always kind of call it. It's not just a singular purpose item. It's a double purpose or triple purpose item. And I think things like that are always kind of nice to have for the whole general setup and just to kind of like the buffer your almost like booth, and it's all those little things like that, and try things out. Just even there's like the things I always call them, like sometimes there's like the novelty items that like you kind of get that technically aren't really great for selling because they just cost too much to print, but they look kind of cool when you just sort of set them up or anything like that. You know what I mean?
Oh no, I had stick-on tattoos.
Yeah.
Which were like great for kids, like because which is not great because like it's an adult.
It's like here, kids, ever read it?
But like kids would come, like I think some people put out like candy and stuff, which is fine. But I was like, oh, these little self-adhesive tattoos. It was fun. But I just put them out for free.
It's just something.
Check
fun.
It out.
Something fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Spencer, I forgot at the top to ask you, how long do you usually go for? Like, am I dragging you into overtime?
Oh, well, I was saying, like, generally, like, we're about the right time anyways. I always go for kind of give or take an hour and a half. I was going to say, don't want to take too much of your day and so on like that. But this is probably a perfect place to wrap it up because you know what we'll do? We'll just have to get back together again and do another podcast. Back in the day, sometimes we'd go, like, I remember me and we had some of them that went like 3.5 hours. And granted, I would just split them in half at that point because,
right.
But I feel like, nowadays I kind of go, an hour and a half's a nice solid time and so on like that. And as I said, we just get back together. I think that just makes for another great podcast, Yes. In fact, I'll hopefully within a month or two, if you will have me on, I'll be able to talk about the newest issue of Gun. Hey, we'll just plan on that then. But till then, Jack, where is the best place for everybody to go to make sure they can find a copy of Gun? I mean, I know you can get on Comixology and all that good stuff, but where would you want to send them? Well, if they're listening now, Comixology, it's on sale on Comixology. So you can go to Comixology. The easiest way is just to put Gun series in the search bar. There's like, I think 6 Gun and a couple other, but like you'll spot it it's the only one called Gun. And then, they've got us on sale for like, you can get volume 1 for $2.99, which is a great price. It's less than a Starbucks. Yeah. You can always go to guncomic.com and, most of the issues are available in print. All of the trade, like the one trade, and then there's like a collected version of Slaughterball 1 and 2 are available in print. And then some of the individual single issues, obviously issue number 1. So like if you want print, and then there's digital versions there. I think most people like most of the digital sales go through Comixology, and then you can find me at The Villainist on Twitter or at Reckless Eyeballs on Instagram. Why not make them the same? I don't know. I'm not very good at this. That's okay. I mean, it leads you all the different places and so on. But make sure to go out and check out Gun. Totally awesome book. The writing's fantastic. The artwork's just like pure brilliance in there. You won't really see another book out there like it nowadays. In the modern. That kind of artwork that doesn't exist too well. I mean, that's when I think about all the other books I have, I want to say are at least 25 years old that have that painted look to them. I don't think I have anything else that's in the newer realm with the water. I mean, if you looked hard enough, you'll probably find one. I'm not saying that nobody does it, but still, it's a great art. I love it. I'm always very appreciative when I see that kind of stuff like that. It always kind of is a really cool thing, but yeah. No, I totally. You were saying like I worked in the '90s in the comic shop, and I feel like that was the sort of period like Epic, like those great old Epic books. They would have these great like you would see these like Bill Sienkiewicz or Ken Williams, like these great painted covers, and it was sort of like like they were also kind of like they were sort of like weird and off kilter stories. Like so that was sort of like I think like that was like I locked in on that, and like when I was finally like I want to make my own comic, that was the kind of comic I wanted to make. Although you are right, it definitely doesn't look the same as other comics. That's a good thing. That's what you want. No. That's the key thing you want. But yeah, Pizza Boys, the new trade. Is it only at cons, or can people pick it up? You could literally. I have it myself. I have the prints, so I could send them out myself. I never made like a listing or anything for it right yet, but I have them all myself. We'll have it at the cons. Working on getting at any moment now, the Indie Planet version will be up there too, so I can at least have that link too. But so it's all there. Of course, it's on Amazon and Comixology in the digital format and so on. Check all that information out oldmanorange.com. But yeah, I do have them, so I can send one over to you. Awesome. Okay. Take care. I got a hat too big for a town too small. I picked a fight too short with a guy too tall. And lately it's been nothing but snake boots and gunfire, enough to make anyone get so sick and tired of doing the same things we do every day. Why
watching the sun go down as we all ride away. Cause in the wild, wild west, life can get pretty dull. Leaning back and ending every sentence with y'all. We're in the wrong